Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all the upsets and close upsets from this past weekend. Texas and Virginia just outright escape from their matchups. Texas Tech, Miami, Nebraska, all of those teams fall, including Memphis. A lot of games that totally change the foundation of what the CFP is going to be moving forward. But let's get into a little bit of a whip around. We have a number of things to talk about, and let's go ahead and start with the big one that everyone's talking about right now. Billy Napier has been fired after beating Mississippi State, the second person in the SEC that's been fired over the last couple of years after beating the Bulldogs, which has got to hurt just a little bit. But we'll talk about this much more in much more detail going forward into Tuesday and going forward after that. But there's a lot of things to say about Billy Napier, and we'll talk about it a lot on Tuesday. But I'm really impressed that this team never quit. There was a number of moments over the last 2 years where they could have quit, where he could have kind of packed it in, where this team could have just kind of said, well, we're not going to be able to get this one done. We're not going to be able to save his job. Let's just kind of save eligibility, move forward, and transfer out. None of those players did this. And even yesterday, they fought until the very last play for that guy, and they very obviously like him a lot. He wasn't winning the football game. So that's the short and long of it, and there is no argument to be made here that he deserved to keep his job. It's just to say it's really hard to keep everyone as engaged as he did throughout this time. A lot of respect for him there. And this was a far from perfect game, but they found a way to get it done. Jaden Baugh continues to prove that he might be the single most talented running back in the entire country. It's going to be a really interesting time over there at Florida, because I know for a fact if everyone around the country got their pick of rosters to kind of, let's say, pillage, for lack of a better term, I think Florida would be very, very high on the list. When you have DJ Lagway and Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown and Jaden Baugh, all of these guys are elite players that can do elite things at different places. Now, DJ Lagway, I get a little bit of pushback on, but I think if he's healthy and can practice, he can do some really incredible things. But overall, you got to try to keep guys around. If you're the new head coach, I don't know how easy that's going to be to do. So we'll talk about it more on Tuesday as this kind of unravels and we see just what it looks like. And I'll give my my group of names. I have one specific name that you call in until they say yes, pretty much. And I'll talk about that on Tuesday. But overall, you get a win to go out on. I guess that's the best I can put right now. For Mississippi State, they move forward to a game with Texas that they can win it and get within a win of bowl eligibility would be a massive thing for Jeff Lebby in year 2. For Florida, I don't know what it looks like. Going into Georgia, I like to think they're going to have juice because this team has had juice the last couple of times, but definitely something I'm a little bit worried about moving forward for this Florida team. We'll see. And we'll talk about it more on Tuesday. We'll get into all the craziness and we'll see what this looks like for Florida moving forward. I know you have a number of really good options. One that I would not be denied on, and we'll talk about that when it unfolds on Tuesday. The top of the Big Ten, roll on. Ohio State beats Wisconsin 34-0. That's the best team in football. I get it. It's Wisconsin. I understand that. I like to think I know football. That's an elite football team. Julian Sainz playing really high-level quarterback, 393 yards, 4 touchdowns, continues to grow up. The defense is just an outright nightmare. They get Penn State after a bye week. This team's rolling on, and I don't see them losing at least until Michigan, and we'll figure out what that looks like when we get there. Indiana gets a win 38-13 over Michigan State. Again, Fernando Mendoza looks like an incredible Heisman Mendoza, as they call it. 332 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. They should be 12-0. Now, they got to beat UCLA here coming up, who's now a hot team. We'll talk about that in a second, but they should be 12-0 heading into the Big Ten title playing. Probably a 12-0 Ohio State. And then Oregon gets a 56-10 win over Rutgers. They were angry, and Rutgers was the punching bag. There's nothing more that needs to be said. They ran for over 400 yards in this football game. Very good team. Still has USC, Washington, Nebraska, those teams lost. They still have Wisconsin, Minnesota, USC, and Washington later in the season. This team should be in a CFP, whether it's 10-2 or 11-1. It doesn't really matter. I think it's going to be 11-1, though. Georgia Tech gets a win 27-18 over Duke. They found a way to get it done, and Duke handed them a lot of chances to do it. This first half for Duke was downright, it wasn't terrible, is the weirdest thing. There were multiple big-time mistakes, is probably the best way to put it. They marched down the field in the very first drive. At the 2-yard line, they fumble, and Georgia Tech takes it back the entire way to the house, goes up 7-0. Not the way you expected to start it if you're Duke. They march right back down the field. They botch a field goal snap, and Georgia Tech gets the ball back in. I don't think they scored on that drive, but at the very least, you gave Georgia Tech another opening. The rest of the time, it was Georgia Tech's game. The second that you let Georgia Tech stay in this game all the way to halftime, you were in trouble. And I think Duke understood that at the time. Georgia Tech outscores them 20-11 in the second half, and that was a late touchdown and 2-point conversion to take it from 20-3. It was 4 60-plus yard touchdown drives, or scoring drives, excuse me, not touchdown drives in the second half for Georgia Tech. It's just a really good football team. Now, it's far from a perfect football team, and we'll see how they stack up against the elite teams of the country down the road. But at the end of the day, it's a tough football team that finds a way to stick in games and then makes enough plays late. It's going to be an interesting team to watch moving forward. Obviously, the game late against Georgia, they have Pitt right before that. They should be able to go undefeated the rest of the way in the ACC. We'll see how that unfolds the rest of the way. But 7-0 for the first time since 1966. Duke's got to feel like they want this back. I can promise you that, and we'll see what happens the rest of the way. I think they need some help to get back into things really in the ACC with that overall record of 4-3. But Georgia Tech gets Syracuse this weekend, then Pitt and Georgia later. It's a really good football team that finds a way to win football games, much like a team that we were talking about earlier that I'm now blanking on, A&M, much like a team that just finds a way to win football games. Going to be hugely important in a conference that is going to come down to a lot of weird moments. Michigan just dominates Washington 24-7 in this game. If that's the Michigan we get going forward, they could be the fourth CFP team from the Big Ten. I don't know what that looks like, is the big time question, because they got to win out at least up to Ohio State and then probably beat Ohio State again. So we'll see how that unfolds, of course, but a very efficient performance from Bryce Underwood. Andrew Marsh is a special player. He is the key to that offense moving forward because he can do so much stuff after the catch. Obviously has the elite hands with that one-handed catch. He's a great, great player. It's not going to be a crazy offense. It's not going to be an offense that does all types of explosive plays, but it's going to be a productive one. At least it can be a productive one, and if they find a way to keep that going all the way up to the Ohio State game, you're going to have a puncher's shot. We'll see what happens the rest of the season, but that's a Michigan team that can do some really good things. I've seen that before this season and hasn't quite come to fruition. But for Washington, I think they got to win out. You already have 2 losses. You have Oregon later on in the year. You have Illinois this upcoming weekend. It's going to be really tough. Possible, but really, really tough to pull off. Michigan should roll this weekend against Michigan State. They get Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland before that big one against Ohio State. So Michigan's still in it. The Big Ten is very, very weird in that you have 4 teams up top and then everyone fighting for that 4th spot, and I don't know who's going to get it or if anyone's going to get it by the end of the season. Maryland falls to UCLA. UCLA just keeps rolling on. It's the weirdest thing in the world, but it's a team that has found a way to get it done. 3-0 with the current head coach current coaching staff. The head coach took over one game before that, but they add Jerry Neuheisel to the mix after that and have kind of ripped the rest of the way. Now, the offense has taken a little bit of a step back the last couple of weeks, but they found a way to get it done with the defense. Tim Skipper has gotten these guys ready to roll. Jerry Neuheisel has done enough offensively to get this team moving, and even with a number of mistakes from Nico Imaliava and all these players on the UCLA offense, they did enough. And it's one of those things where it's going to be far from perfect, but they got an INT late, scored 10 straight points, and found a way to march down after a big touchdown drive from Maryland and get a big-time win. So UCLA moves forward. They got a big one against Indiana this upcoming weekend. I don't think they're going to win, but who knows with this UCLA team right now. They're playing really good football and continue to prove a lot of people wrong. Penn State loses by 1. This one hurt me. I'm not a Penn State fan. I like Penn State. I don't love Penn State by any means. This one hurt. This is tough. This is just one of those moments where you have a number of chances to win a football game. You just fall short. The offense continued to fall short. Ethan Grunkmeyer had a less than inspiring first start for his career, which makes sense against an Iowa defense. So not all that crazy, but you funneled the ball to Katron Allen, which is a win, I suppose. But at the end of all this, Terry Smith was always going to be fighting an uphill battle when he took over this job. That was not an argument. This one's going to get really ugly. 6-6 would be an outright miracle at this point. So it's going to get bad. You got a bye week and then you get Ohio State and Indiana. Just kind of strap in and just hope for it to finish and find the new guy at the end of it. Now, we'll talk about that more on Tuesday, and it was an interesting thing I heard Brooks Austin bring up earlier that you're just not attacking this thing the way you probably should be. Why are you afraid to hire someone from a CFP staff? Why aren't you willing to take a guy that you know can win football games because you're going to be a little bit late on the portal? I get it. You got to get a lot of players in. I get you have a lot of different things to juggle. But overall, I'd get an elite coach. That's just me. But at the end of the day, we'll see how this unfolds. Iowa gets a close win. Penn State just, I think they're just hoping for the end at this point and a new head coach. We'll see who that ends up being. I have my pick. I talked about it a little bit earlier. We'll talk about it a little bit more on Tuesday. Another head coach that could come open, I think Mike Norvell might be cooked. As crazy as that sounds, after, 18 months ago, he was in line to possibly make a CFP, and now they're this. And I don't know what to make of it. First of all, want to make sure that I hope that Thomas Castellanos is okay. Very scary moment late in that football game, but at the end of the day, you fall just short on the 1 yard line, and Stanford gets a win. I don't know what happened to this football team. That's not the same football team we saw in week one. It's not like Alabama is worse than Stanford and isn't playing good football, and Florida State was just terrible back then and is still terrible. I don't know what happened. I really don't. It was a better football team in week one. They fought really, really hard. They got fully up for that game, and they've laid down since. And it's totally inexplicable. It's relatively unexcusable. It's just ridiculous stuff from this Florida State football team. I don't know what you do. I think the reality is I don't know how you move forward with Mike Norvell. It's not to say that Mike Norvell is not a good coach. I tend to believe he actually is, but the reality is you go 2-10, you clear house, you get totally new players, a new coaching staff, new hires. You win a massive game in week one. You have every chance to take that as a galvanizing moment and move forward and continue to win football games, and you fold in a conference where you had it open for you, especially with the Miami team that can't stand success, seemingly. You had an opening, and you left it on the table. It's tough. It's a program that I think is going to find a new head coach, and I don't know what it looks like moving forward, but a lot to figure out down there in Tallahassee for Stanford. Good for y'all. You got to get a big-time win in the ACC, but a lot of things to figure out for Florida State. A little group of six scoreboard here. South Florida gets a big-time win over FAU, dominating them 48-13. Boise State dominates UNLV for much of this game, 63-24. Tulane gets one of the weirder wins over Army that I've ever seen. 2 touchdowns in the last 3 minutes, including the weirdest play in the world by Shaz Preston. Then you have JMU dominate ODU in the second half of this game. One of the weirder starts to a football game I've ever seen, but JMU able to get the win 63-37. And then Coastal Carolina gets a big-time rivalry win over App State 45-37. But overall, just a ridiculous weekend of football. A number of teams that probably should have lost that find a way out of it. A number of teams that did lose, and now you're questioning where they stand in the CFP. And a lot of big-time wins for big-time programs. But overall, I don't know what to make of all this. It is going to be really, really weird the rest of the season. There could be teams that are playing terrible right now that find their way into the CFP, teams that are playing great right now that totally fold down the stretch of the season. I don't know what to make of any of it. We'll be back on Tuesday to break down all the coaching hires. I'll give my top 25 in a blog tomorrow, so definitely be on the lookout for that. We'll get into coaching updates, maybe a rant or two, because there's a couple of things in college football that are making me mad right now, but at the end of the day, there are a number of things that are going to happen over the next 24 hours, and frankly, when I pick up my phone right now, I have a feeling there's going to be some type of news in college football, but Billy Napier's already been let go from Florida. I think Hugh Freeze, Mike Norvell, and a couple other guys could be following him. We'll get into it all. On Tuesday, we'll get into a couple of predictions for this upcoming weekend that's absolutely massive for that conversation that we just had, a number of things that are going to happen over the next little bit. We'll be back on Tuesday to break it all down and get into a little bit of the craziness that will be Week 9. But thank you so much for tuning in. Please do subscribe, like, comment, do all of that great stuff. It means the world to me. But thanks so much for tuning in. And I will see you guys on Tuesday to break down what I have to assume is going to be 3 or 4 coaching openings that we got to talk about. But thanks so much for tuning in. I will see you guys on Tuesday.